Hello, my name is Christopher Scott and I'm a small groups pastor of a local church, and in this video I'm going to give you 5 tips to ask great questions in your small group. 5 things you can do in your small group to ask great questions and facilitate a great small group. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to review the material in your small group, right? So you want to get to know kind of the big idea for that lesson in that week. You want to know maybe what the discussion is going to look like. You want to think about maybe how people in your small group might react. What are going to be their views on what you're going to say? So that's the first thing you want to do in your preparation time, is to get to know and review the material in your small group, okay? And that's going to look differently based on you, based on what type of a study you're doing, whether you're doing kind of a verse-by-verse Bible study or more of a DVD study. That preparation is going to look different. Let's say you're using the Warren Wiersbe Bible study guides that our church really likes to use and that I really like. If you're going to use this guide, the preparation is different than maybe if you're doing a DVD study by Chip Ingram, right? The preparation is going to be different, and this is how they're different. If you're doing a verse-by-verse study through a Bible study guide like this, the first thing you're going to want to do to prepare is to read the passage for that week a few times, right? Read it a couple times, get a feel for the big idea, what's going on. Just kind of familiarize yourself with the passage. Then you're going to want to go through and answer some of the questions in the Bible study guide, right? So just jot down a couple answers. Don't have to be long journal entries of paragraphs and complete sentences and correct grammar. Just jot down a few thoughts. Then you're going to want to read a commentary about that passage, right? To get a feel for what a pastor or scholar says is a correct interpretation or correct application of that passage, right? And so the Wiersbe guides come with a commentary that follow along that I really like, right? That we get for our leaders. So you're going to want to first, read the passage. Second, ask some questions, work through the questions. Third, read a commentary. And then lastly, go back through your questions and see if there's anything that you want to add to your answers or change based on the commentary, right? And that's how you want to prepare for your small group if you're doing a verse-by-verse study. Let's say you're doing a DVD study. We like to use the DVD studies by Chip Ingram and his ministry Living on the Edge. The preparation for that's going to be a little different. What you want to do first to prepare and review the material is watch the DVD, right? Pop it in the DVD player, pull out your workbook, fill in the blanks, and just watch the material, get a feel for what's covered and what you're going to look for in the group. Then you're going to want to look at the notes in the back. A lot of the study guides will have some notes for leaders. And for each session, they'll have 3 or 4 bullet points about what you're going to look for in the small group, what you're going to be aware of, maybe how to facilitate a good discussion, maybe how to help the people in the group apply the material to their lives, things like that, okay? And then usually the Chip Ingram material, there's some coaching that they give for facilitators. Sometimes it's on the DVD. You can click on the coaching for each lesson, or sometimes it's online. But that's another thing you want to do is you want to watch the material, look at the notes in the back for each lesson, and then if there is some coaching that's provided, watch that. And the coaching usually is given by Chip Ingram and Lance Witt. They'll give like 2 to 4 minutes for each lesson, just a couple helpful tips for you as a facilitator to help you do a good job with your group, okay? So that's the first thing you want to do to ask great questions in your small group, is to review the material beforehand and just come ready. Second thing you want to do in your small group to ask great questions is you want to practice reading the questions aloud, right? So practice reading them out loud, because it's easy sometimes to read something and we can read it, we can think it in our head, but when you actually have to vocalize it, sometimes it's a little more difficult to pronounce things like that, especially if there's going to be books of the Bible you have to say, or names of the Bible, okay? So just practice saying them aloud, just so that you don't stumble or stutter maybe when it's time to do it in the group. Third thing you want to do to ask great questions in your small group, you're going to want to just read the question. Don't summarize the questions, don't change the questions, just read them, right? So here in this study by Chip Ingram, the title is How to Come to Grips with the Real You. The first question is, what are your 3 strengths and your 3 weaknesses? What are your 3 strengths and your 3 weaknesses? Don't change it to 4, don't change it to 5, just read it. Just walk with the material and follow it, right? And don't feel like, if the question's a little longer, don't feel like you're going to bore people if you read the question. That's your job as a facilitator, is to read the question and then to get them talking, okay? The fifth thing you're going to want to do to ask great questions in your small group is you don't want to add or subtract questions from the lesson, right? So you're As a small groups pastor, I'm really picky about the groups, about the material that we use and the studies that I encourage the groups to use, right? I've strategically picked it. I give them an order to do the studies in for a reason, and I trust that material to help guide people in their growth as they walk with Christ, right? And so with that, don't add or subtract questions from the lesson because they're all in there for a reason, right? They build up to a certain point. They're making certain assumptions along the way and trying to build on those assumptions and answers, right? So don't add or subtract unless you really feel like you have to, right? Maybe if your group kind of struggles each week to complete the lesson, you can get through 80 or 90% of the lesson, but you don't quite complete it. Then if you want to subtract a couple questions or delete a couple, that's okay. Or maybe if there's 10 questions and you come to question 7 and you feel like the group has already answered that question in question 5, right? You kind of got a little off topic, but you talked about question 7 and question 5. That's okay to skip it too. But as a general rule, don't add or subtract questions from the lesson. Fifth, don't change the questions, right? So I was visiting a small group once where they were in Luke chapter 4, and Luke chapter 4 talks about Jesus being tempted in the desert by Satan, right? And so the question was, Jesus was tempted in the desert. How have you been tempted in your own life? And the facilitator decided to change the question from, Jesus wasn't tempted, he was tested. So Jesus was tested. How have you been tested in your life? And when he asked the question, you can see the whole group just got confused. They're like, okay, number one, you're changing the question. Number two, you're changing the Bible. Like, the Bible says he was tempted, not tested. Why are you changing it, right? So then you had to spend about 15 minutes circling around about how Jesus was tested, not tempted, right? And he kind of explains it, and then by that time, they'd forgotten what the question was originally, so then he kind of goes back to it, and they still just didn't get it, right? So, as you know, don't change the questions. They're all in there for a specific reason. People have chosen them for a reason. If you do have an issue with one, you don't understand it, you think it doesn't make sense, you think it's dumb, then talk to your co-leader or apprentice in your group, see if they think the same thing, and then let your small groups pastor know, or your community leader, whoever you interact with at church, right? But as a general rule, don't change the questions, right? So 5 things you can do to ask great questions in your small group. Number 1, review the material. Number 2, practice reading the questions aloud. Number 3, read them to the group, word for word. Number 4, don't add or subtract questions from the lesson. Number 5, don't change the question. My name's Christopher Scott. I hope this video was helpful to you as you facilitate a small group. If you like this video and want to subscribe, you can find other small group. You can subscribe up there, subscribe button, and you'll get updates on future videos. If you want other small group ministry tips to facilitate a great small group, you can find those videos up there. If you want to learn to use the Warren Wiersbe Bible Study Guides, I got a bunch of videos on how you use these. You can find those videos down there. If you want to learn how to use the Chip Ingram DVD studies in a small group, I got some videos down there on how you can use those in your small group. So thanks for watching. Hope to catch you again in another video soon.